Okay, good morning, everybody. Oh, as soon as I did that, somebody else needs to come in the room. There we go. Um, Welcome to Zoom with the Principal. This is our second to last one of the year. Next week will be our last Zoom with the Principal of the school year. And today's topic, we're going to be talking and revisiting the idea of acceptance and radical acceptance. And then after you've accepted something, resetting goals after that. So hold on, I feel like there's an echo. I'm going to mute you guys. There we go. Okay. So, this I think I've mentioned before, Yvonne and I actually go through and kind of map out throughout the school year and look at subjects that we want to cover throughout the school year. I plan out these Zooms. I know when the counselors do their presentations, I'll have them come in the next day. And so I've got a spreadsheet of like the topics for the whole year. This particular date, May 15th, I have had blank. Because I couldn't think of another topic that I wanted to do. And I was like, something will come to me before the end of the year, something that will be timely, that will be good to talk about. So, and then lo and behold, two things happened. One directly to me, and then one to a close friend of mine that made me think that this is a good topic to do today. And so I've been going back and forth on, do I want to like share like what happened in my life that made me think that this would be a good topic? And I've settled on yes. So I'm gonna be a little vulnerable and probably overshare a little bit. Not anything like super personal, but it's not something that I shared with a lot of people at work. I recently applied for a different job. Not that I wanted a new job. I love my job. I love being at Piedmont Hills, but this was a promotion at the district office. And it was something that like, kind of like when you have your like 5-year plan, like this was a goal, like, hey, that's where I want to be in 5 years. And so this job came open and I thought, okay, this is like the next step in my career. And, people like that, my loved ones and people I work with closely said, yes, you are totally qualified for this job. You will get this job. And I got it. Like, I'm not going to lie. I believed the hype. I thought I was going to get it. Long story short, I did not get it. And I had to really like, because this was something that I had put in my mind as like a long-term career goal that I wanted this job and then not getting it and realizing it's not going to come open again. Like this was my shot and I that door is now closed. And so I had to really like do some radical acceptance. And I'm glad that we've talked about this and I've actually had, this training to know how to do this because I really had to like do some soul searching and some like difficult yeah, that really sucks. I am actually really sad about this, but it's okay. And then really what was healing for was kind of like resetting career goals for myself. And rather than thinking, okay, I want to get a job at the district office, looking at, okay, the next 10 years of my career, like really settling into where I'm at currently and like making this like be like my end goal. And kind of resetting like what I wanted for my life. And that part was, I went like completely honest, like the most healing part for me when you like don't get something that you really want. Kind of reframing and rethinking about life and my goals and what I wanted and being okay with a new direction. The second thing that happened, and this didn't happen to me, but it happened to a close friend of mine. Her son is a senior in high school. They don't go to Piedmont Hills. And he is one of those kids, very, very smart, very high achieving, very good grades, was a national merit scholar finalist, like super like, star, high achieving. Got rejected from a lot of colleges. He did get into Cal Poly, but doesn't actually want to go to Cal Poly. He, had applied to Harvard and MIT and like it's just really like lofty, huge, like high achieving schools and didn't get into them. And he is really struggling with what does he want to do now? Um, the college he did get into, he doesn't want to go. And some of you may be sitting here going, my kid would die to go to Cal Poly. Like, and I know a lot of kids that they would love to get into that school. But, each person has their own individual, thoughts and like what they want, with, where they want to go to school. And so, you know, as a family, they've really like struggled with like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to take a gap year and then reapply to schools? Or, do you want to just go to Cal Poly? And so his parents are, being very, I think, very good parents as we all try to be, and trying to be very, very supportive of the choices that he's making. And they want to let him make his own decisions. But a lot of this, especially with like going to college, it's a family decision too. I mean, the reality in their situation is he's gotten a scholarship offer from Cal Poly. And so it's much more like financially feasible for him to go there. And then if he doesn't take this opportunity and then like waits a year and tries again, who knows, like, will they get another scholarship offer? And like, so there's a lot of choices that come with that. And, you know, so sometimes it's not just like with our teenagers, it's not just always like, sorry, Yvonne, you're echoing. Um, so, um, so I just, that's where kind of my mind and my frame of mind, and setting up why I wanted to talk about, this subject. I think it's timely. We're at the end of the school year, and, you may be looking at your child and they may be unhappy with how this school year turned out. Maybe they didn't get the grades they wanted. You as a parent may be unhappy with how the school year turned out. Um, and, we're not quite done yet. I know with my own son, he currently has a D in a class, and I'm like, oh God, you have a couple weeks. He goes to school 1 week longer than we do. So he's 3 more weeks of school, but I'm like, you need to get that grade up, and get that fixed. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts, and I wanted to open this up a little bit on, just maybe stuff that you've struggled with in your own life about, with accepting and then having to reset and like reframe goals, or, your teenagers that you've worked with. Amy, I know you just jumped on. I don't know, you don't have your camera on, so I don't know if you're able to. There you are. I don't know if you want to kind of speak with like what you've seen with the students that you're working with on this idea of like things aren't going the way they want, and they're having to accept that and kind of make a new goal, and like, like really like kind of reset and reframe how they're thinking about things and the struggles that they're having with that.
Yeah, especially, and sorry, I just jumped on, so I might have missed, like you setting the stage. But I think especially this time of year is a great time to kind of reflect on how did this year go? What were my goals in the beginning of this year? And how's that going? And then maybe a reality check of like, how do we maybe reassess for next year? Um, of was that a realistic goal? And maybe I should change it for next year.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, I think the end of a school year is actually a perfect time to do something like that. Because it is like you're moving into this transition phase. And, a lot of you that are parents, you probably may work in a school, but you may not. So maybe your whole life doesn't revolve around a school year the way, ours do, that work, people who work in the school setting. It's it is a great time to kind of think about and reassess, like, you know, how things have been going and what can we do to, make next year better. Because, when we start school again in August, it's a fresh start. And so looking at like, hey, what do we need to do to make next year better? Have you, Amy, like I talked about, well, you missed this part, but I shared like my own personal, that I shared with the parents that I had recently applied for a job that I did not get, and like really having to reset, like, and like my own for myself, like like what am like where is my career going to go from here? And like what, and like making that okay with myself. And I am totally, I don't want people to think I'm actually, like, now that I've stepped back and like reflected about this, I think this is actually, not getting that job is actually the best thing that might have happened to me. I'm actually pretty happy about it. But then I also shared, a good friend of mine whose son didn't get into the college that he wanted, and he's really struggling with, like, okay, well, what do I do now? And, how do I make this okay? And I think it sounds like he's really struggling with just the acceptance of like, and kind of like, oh no, like, and like, I think a lot of times it's really hard, like you want to blame other people and like make excuses, but that's not really accepting like this is the reality. And like, I think that can be, really just kind of like going through the stages of grief, right? Like you didn't get something big, and having to kind of go through that to finally like you accept, like, okay, this is what happened. I don't know if you can speak about that, like how you help kids through that.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the stages of grief because I think that like we kind of all gloss over the fact that when we're disappointed, it hurts, right? And then there are so many stages of feelings of like, guilt, anger, sadness, all of those things that come along with not getting something that you want. And as adults, I think sometimes it's really easy to be like, come on, move on. It's not that big of a deal, right? Especially for teenagers, and especially when we've all lived through similar things. And it's easy to say, well, that's not important to me anymore. So you should get past it because it's all going to work out in the end because we all believe that. But especially for teenagers, and especially at this time of year, and college acceptance is a big thing that I see. A lot of our youth, their identity is tied to where they're going to college, right? Or what they're doing immediately after high school. Um, and right now in the school year, I feel like with students, I'm really just sitting with them in those negative feelings because there's not a lot we can do to fast forward that like piece of acceptance. As uncomfortable as it is for all of us adults, we just have to let them like work through it. And sometimes it takes a really long time. And honestly, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Virginia, your camera's on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So what I do with myself and with my kids is kind of set up for failure as well. I always tell the boys, give it your all. If that's something you want, give it your all. But we have to remember we're not the only ones applying. We're not the only ones, going for something. There's other people as well. So there's a good chance that we may not get it. So what would happen if we may not get it? And I have them think about it. And I myself think about if I don't get it, it's going to be okay. What's going to be my plan B, or what should I do differently? So I have them start thinking about that and start thinking not only like, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it, but like there's a good chance I may not get it. And what would I do if I may not get it? So that's something that I try to kind of tell the boys ahead of time, or I'll, when, for example, my younger son didn't get onto the basketball team because it was very competitive. And when I dropped him off for tryouts, and I said, remember, if you don't get it, it's okay. Like there's other things that we can do. Maybe it wasn't meant for you, like it's okay. There's reasons why everything happens and it's okay. So I try to kind of have them feel that part as well, just so that the blow is not so hard because it still hurts, but the blow won't be so tough, or they'll have that plan B ready in place.
Yeah. I think that's really good. And I think it's really, as a person that's like the support person in somebody's life, like knowing how to be supportive, and what's helpful and what's not helpful, I think is really important. You know, when I was going through, you know, when I found out I didn't get that job, my husband, God bless him, he was trying to be very supportive. But his way of being supportive was being angry at the world and blaming other people and, you know, finding other reasons and I had to like stop him and be like, hey, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but this actually isn't helpful for me. I just need to accept that like I wasn't the person for this job. But you know, so sometimes like having somebody else make excuses actually isn't all that helpful. And so I think, you know, as parents, maybe like that's something that we can fall into a lot of times because we always want to see our child as like the most perfect thing in the world. And you know, not really looking at like the faults and sometimes, you know, where, you know, maybe the part they played, and that maybe they weren't like they didn't get into that school or they didn't get onto that team just because that wasn't the right place for them.
Mhm.
And there were people that were more qualified. And so I think that that's really um, hard. But making excuses, I think, isn't always the most helpful. Um, so Amy says, different Amy, in the chat, I started my nursing career as a pediatric heart surgery transplant at the hospital I dreamed of working at. When this took a toll on my mental and physical health, I felt such disappointment in myself and needed to pivot. Now I work as a school district nurse and absolutely love it. I hope this serves as an example for my daughters. What we dream of may not be the best fit, on often something better comes along. I think that that is exactly right. Like I thank you for sharing that. I think like you get this idea in your head of like, you know, and I think we like naturally kind of do this in our society because we always talk about like, you know, you have to have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. And so you have this like idea of like, this is where I want to end up. Oftentimes it's like usually about career and schooling and like, you know, that sort of thing. And then, you know, like you, Amy, like you got it and then you hated it and it didn't actually end up being what you wanted. And that can also be really like jarring. And so, and some kids, like with, you know, kids going off to college, like they actually maybe got into the college that they thought that they wanted and they're like going off and then some of them are going to find that they don't like it, that it's not the right fit for them. They go and then it's not, good. So Amy, do you have advice on how um we can like help our kids reset goals or do that for ourselves and like you know talk about like pivoting and how you change direction and what sort of questions to ask yourself?
Yeah. Um, I love the experiences that we all have, especially as like adults with kids in this room, because I think it's great to share these things with our kids and share them with like little pieces of here's a time where I didn't get what I wanted, or here's a time that, you know, my life pivoted. I also love that, Ginny, you talked about your husband and how he provided support for you, but it didn't work because obviously we don't know what's best for our partner or our kids all the time. And I think we've talked about it in different coffees with the principal about asking our kids, our partners, like, how can I support you right now? Do you want me to be upset with you? Do you want me to give you advice? Do you want me to share a story? And maybe just going back to those basics of asking our kids, especially our teens, like, what do you want from me right now? Because I can sit here with you and I can be mad, or I can like just talk a lot of ish about that job and why you shouldn't have got it, or I can just sit here and cry with you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, I think for me and like in like the pivoting, like having to like really like what was helpful is to think about like the other parts of my life. Um, that if I didn't have this like super demanding job that was going to take a lot of my time, kind of like you were like, I mean, like really when I sat back and reflected, like, well, you know, that actually, it would have been pretty stressful to get that job. It would have been a lot. And there's parts of my life that I would have started neglecting. And there's hobbies that I want to develop that I probably wouldn't have had the time to develop. And now, like, kind of the silver lining is, you know what, I'm gonna have time to do that. I'm gonna have time to focus on like different parts of my life. And that in the long run is going to make me an overall happier person, because you can't just have one dimension. Yvonne has brought the wheel of life many times, that we've talked about that, you know, and like what areas of your life are super full and what are being neglected. And so when it's lopsided, when you've got all of your energy going to one area of your life, that's not the ideal. And honestly, that's not what we want to model for our kids. So I think that was something that really helped me. I think that that's difficult for a teenager though. I think teenagers, you know, they just don't have, you know, when we go back a couple weeks ago and we talked about aging, and like one of the benefits of aging, and I think we all agree, the big benefit is you have that life experience, that you're able to put things in perspective. And you know, teenagers just don't have that yet. And so we have to help um, guide them in a gentle way, because again, like helpful, not helpful advice, us being like, you're going to be okay. It's not that, you know, it's not that deep. It's not that big of a deal. Like this isn't, you know, something, and just blowing off the feelings they have, that's not helpful, because they have big feelings. And yeah.
For sure. I've been making a lot of lists with students recently, like pros and cons lists, especially when it comes to a common theme right now is like college acceptance and not getting into the college that, you know, you'd always dreamed about going. Obviously, there's lots of feelings associated with that, right? Especially if you've said for the last 4 years, I'm going to Berkeley, right? But sitting down and actually doing like a pros and cons list of like what could be great about going to this other college. Students are finding benefit in doing that, because especially with college acceptance, I guess this is specific to that. A lot of it is just the appeal of that college, right? It's not necessarily even anything to do with it specifically. So I feel like sitting down, going through like, how could my life be great about going to Riverside? Will they still offer my same major? Will they still offer these clubs that I'm interested in? That's a little bit eye-opening too.
That's really great advice. I actually made a little note to text my friend after this and ask her if she's made a pros and cons list with her son. So that would be a great thing to do. So I think that that's actually like, you know, really like something tangible, like to have them like express, you know, and like rather than just like feeling all their feelings, like kind of like something productive to like, you know, with the direction. I think that that's really great.
Or even like writing down, like if you can break it down into specifics of like, what are you disappointed about in this? And maybe writing that down and putting that in the universe, especially if you're doing it with someone else, because then that can turn into a conversation of like, okay, you're disappointed that you're not going there, but would this school offer that, or could it offer an opportunity similar?
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. Um, I feel like we're maybe naturally wrapping up. Does anybody have any questions or comments or something they want to share with the group? Rupert, do you have anything to add? Did this bring up anything?
Well, if we're bringing on the topic of like if you go to apply for a position, right? I think if there was minimum requirements to even be in that room with the other people, in that itself is an accomplishment, because not everybody is qualified to go for the position that you went for. And it's more or less, it's not how I'm looked at, because everybody should be level.
Mhm.
And if you didn't get the position, then you start to question, like, you don't have to question, was that person better than me? Was that person interviewed better than me? It could just be a lot of different factors. But knowing that I lost to somebody else who was qualified, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm going for a certain college and I have many different colleges that have the same major that I want, sometimes it's like how Amy put it, the school doesn't outweigh how well their department is. So
Mhm.
you can go to the smallest public school, but if that public school has a really good department, it shouldn't outweigh the prestige, because some people, when they hire, they know that this public school may have a stronger English department than, say, Stanford does. I probably not in that sense because it's Stanford, but there could be degradations in between, right? It might be higher than, say, UC Davis as opposed to San Jose State. Agriculture is probably really big in UC Davis, but it's also probably really big in Humboldt. If I didn't get into UC Davis, but Humboldt has like the second strongest in the state, why would I really look at that as a plan B as opposed to, uh, it's harder to get into a bigger school, or more competitive school than it would be to get into a smaller school that just has a stronger department. So I look at it that way. Um, and life isn't fair. Not everything's always going to be, because I am the smartest kid at Piedmont Hills doesn't mean I'm the smartest kid at Santa Teresa, or there could be a kid at Andrew Hill or YB at a school that's not as academic competitive as these schools. It doesn't mean that student is not a genius. He just happens to be in another boundary.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of different factors when I look into stuff, like when you don't get something. But when there's a minimum requirement to apply for something, whether it's a college or a job or anything like that, um, at least enjoy the fact that you were interviewed. Not everybody who applied got an interview, right?
Yeah.
Some people weren't ready to even go to that step. But just because you don't get something that you want now, you may get something, you may have impressed somebody to the fact that they might encourage you to apply for something later. And it might be something that is less stressful, better suits your individuality.
Mhm.
And, and when you talk about like someone with their son, going across the country to a school may not be the best. If he couldn't handle rejection this way, how would he handle being alone and being there's so much more stuff to life than when you're 18 and 19.
Yeah. And this is my just kind of my belief system. I do believe that things happen for a reason, that when like one, like the idea that one door closes and another one opens, like there, like stuff happens for a reason. And when you don't get something that you thought you wanted, like I do believe there's a reason for that. And that's because something like there's a different path that's supposed to be better. I do truly believe that. And and so I think that with kids not getting into and going to the school that they thought they wanted, they go someplace else and maybe they meet like lifelong friends there and like that they never would have met. And like that's like going to like have a like be a major, like wonderful part of their life. And so like there's always like new opportunities. Um, and I think that, kind of like where that's where, to sum all this up and the idea of like what acceptance means to me, you don't like what happened to you. Like you like having that pain and feeling that rejection is not a comfortable feeling. It feels very, very yucky. But the acceptance is like understanding like that's for a reason. I may not have liked it, but I accept that it happened and it was for a reason. And like the resetting part is like looking forward and saying, okay, where am I going to go from here? Because I'm not just going to keep sitting in this yucky feeling. How do I move on from that?
Mhm.
So, Well, thank you guys. I wanted to this is going on, some of the same theme. We talked about this last week. And I asked you guys to come up in your homework for next week's Zoom with the principal is coming up with what are you going to do for yourself this summer. So our topic next week is summer self-care. And so what is something that you are going to do just for you? You are putting yourself, like, this is time that you are doing it for yourself. And so I want everybody to come next week with what are they going to do for themselves this summer? Okay. Rupert, do you already know what yours is? Don't share it, but do you already know what it is in your head? You've got a week. All right. I have a week too. So I've got to think of my own thing. I have a pretty good idea of what it is, but yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys. We are almost at the end of the school year. There's only one more Monday. So it's next Monday because the following Monday is Memorial Day. So we are almost there, almost at the end of the school year. Thank you guys for listening and joining in, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.